Hi there, everyone. My name is Prerak Juthani. I'm an MD MBA student here at Yale, and today I'll be talking about the productivity paradox. This is a very interesting concept I came across as I was reading a Harvard Business Review article, and I just thought it was very fitting to talk about because I know productivity is on a lot of people's minds, and oftentimes we're always trying to find out the best way to optimize it. The productivity paradox is this aspect of why is it that oftentimes when we're working as hard as we are, we often get diminishing returns, right? And so the source of this, as I mentioned earlier, is a Harvard Business Review article. I'll link it in the description below. And it's based on a case study of how these individuals often go to companies and help them work better. And specifically, they talked about Sony Pictures, and they were able to get people to work better, often by demanding less, right? And that is exactly this paradox we're talking about, which is oftentimes when we demand more of ourselves, we often work in a less optimal way. But when we demand less of ourselves, we often work better. So, do you ever notice that sometimes the more you put into a project, oftentimes the harder you work, sometimes you do worse. And I've noticed this myself where, I've gone to now Yale for 4 years, and I genuinely feel like I didn't work nearly as hard here as I did at other stages of my life, and yet the outcomes have been much better. I've been able to foster more amazing relationships. I felt more fulfilled. I've been able to get in much better shape. And yet I genuinely feel like I wasn't working as hard as I thought I was in other points in my life. And so that is ultimately what the paradox we're talking about. And the reason why we're going to address this is oftentimes almost everyone thinks that the more hard we work, the better the outcomes will be. And that is actually not the case. We are not machines. And so what we're trying to show is if you can fulfill your core needs, you'll be able to be more holistically invested in whatever is going on. And these four core needs are physical health, emotional well-being, mental clarity, and spiritual significance. That's what they define in the article. And the whole gist of this article is that if you spend a bit more time focusing on these four things, even if it means you're not being productive, the time you spend on actually working is going to be that much more fruitful, right? So for example, if you're ever hungry and you've tried to work on something, you'll notice that you're not able to work nearly as effectively because guess what? Your physical health is not optimal. And so even if you work 5 to 10 hours, it probably is the same as someone who is not hungry and has had a decent meal working a bit less time, right? And so the point is, spending time on these four competencies can often help you work more efficiently when you do actually work, right? And so now let's actually go into each of these four characteristics and talk about how you can spend a little bit of your time on these four things, and then when you're actually productive, you'll be able to be much more productive. So, think about physical health. How are we defining that? Well, it's this aspect of being able to sleep well, exercise, and have your basic physical needs met. So that way, when you're actually working, you're not worried about, oh my God, I feel restless, I feel sleep deprived, and all of those things. The second thing is emotional well-being. This is this whole aspect of taking the time to reflect on who you are and how you're feeling and being okay with those feelings. If you ever have had any unresolved issues, I'm one of these people. I actually can't work that well because I just am always thinking about this issue that's unresolved. So whether that's a fight with my mom, fight with someone who maybe I care a lot about, I need to address that because oftentimes I find that it detracts from my work if I don't address that. The third thing is this mental clarity aspect. And this is probably one of the hardest things to do, but your mind needs to be able to focus entirely on what it is you're doing. But we live in a world with countless distractions, social media, email notifications, notifications about when your pet's hungry, notifications when your pet's full, right? We live in a world with so many notifications that mental clarity is very elusive. So we need to often create environments that allow for that clarity. And last but not least, spiritual significance. You need to believe that whatever work you're doing is aligning with your purpose, whatever it is that you care so much about. And if you don't believe that, you could be doing amazing work, but you might at the end of the day think that it's useless because you're like, what the heck am I doing with my life? So now, just to go a bit deeper, as we talked about with physical health, this means that making sure that before you sit down to work, don't neglect your lunch, don't neglect your breakfast, and don't neglect your dinner. And obviously, this is much easier said than done. I have found myself neglecting all of these things, especially when I'm stressed. And I have to always remind myself that, hey, if I just ate a little bit, my life changes entirely. But unfortunately, I often neglect it because, as I said, this is much easier said than done. Well, get in a few steps. Make sure you take time for yourself and make sure you exercise. Doing those things will make it that much more fruitful when you are able to work and get things done. Next up, you actually have this emotional health aspect. So for this, I'm still, again, consistently working at it, but you need to figure out what your values are and try to stand up for them and continue to cultivate them regardless of what it is you're working on. So for me, it's always been a big focus on education. I love educating, and I think doing it through technology has always been a passion of mine. And that's why I almost always make time to make one of these videos once a week, even if it has nothing to do with the big things I need to get done. By doing this, you stay honest to yourself, you stay honest to your values, and you remind yourself, like, this is what I care about. When you have these positive controls, is what I like to call them, and you're able to stick to them consistently, I think that's when your emotional well-being will really be able to be okay with where it's at. Otherwise, there's always going to be a part of you that says, I'm doing this, but I don't know why I'm doing it. And this is going to tie back to that spirituality aspect of finding a purpose. Not last but not least, second to last thing, which is mental clarity. Your mind needs to be able to focus on what it needs to focus on. And so what that means is spending a bit of time silencing your phone, silencing your notifications, and also silencing even your email to make sure that when you're working, you're working. And oftentimes, this is why the Pomodoro technique works really well. When you're working for 25 minutes and you shut everything off and then take the 5-minute break in the middle to reset and then check your notifications, that's fine because you're getting a realm of mental clarity there. So guess what? 5 hours with your phone on may not actually be nearly as fruitful as 3 hours with your phone off. And actually, I would probably argue that actually that's very true. I've had 3 hours when I was studying for step one where I'd have my phone off and I'd just be working in Pomodoro intervals, and I'd be getting so much more done than I've ever done when like I actually have my phone on me, and because I'm checking it like every 5 minutes, right? The other thing I'll say here is if there's something on your mind and you're like me where you often can't work with a mind especially when you feel like you need to address an issue, like whether it's a fight with mom or a fight with dad, make sure you address that first because you may think like, screw it, I'll deal with this later. I have found myself often being inhibited because I don't address those things first. So try to do that. And last but not least, this spirituality aspect is something that I cared very deeply about, and that's why I think I'm so grateful to be in medicine. I think when you have your sense of purpose and you know this is what you wanted to do your whole life, and you're actually connecting with a patient, you realize like everything else, that paperwork or all those hoops you have to jump through, were actually worth it. When you have a purpose and you do work that aligns with that purpose, even if that work is very menial, it actually means a lot more. And I think that's why you always have to remind yourself what it is, have people around you that know your purpose. And if you haven't found it yet, keep looking because Steve Jobs said this, but I think with all matters of the heart, once you know, you'll know, right? And if you haven't found your purpose yet, I think it's really important to write down things that you think are meaningful to you because I think that will help you down the road. So with all of this being said, I hope this helped understand the paradox of productivity. Addressing these 4 competencies and making sure they're set will make sure that even if you're working for 3 hours, you're going to be that much better off because I think you're going to be just more clear and more precise with the work you're doing. So if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, comment, share, subscribe. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me. And yeah, have a great day and try to take care of yourself and someone else too if you can. Peace.